In the quiet dawn of the medieval world, before church bells cut through the mist, and before iron tools rang against stone, the day began with bread, not the pale sliced loaves of modern shelves, but heavy dark rounds born from earth and fire. Bread that carried the memory of soil on the hands that shaped it. As cold wind moved across open fields of rye and barley, cloaked figures walked narrow paths toward village ovens, their breath visible in the blue morning air. Baskets pressed to their chests, inside them dough alive with wild yeast. Breathing slowly like the land itself, this bread was not a side dish. It was survival, strength, and promise. The foundation of life in an age where hunger was a constant shadow and endurance was the greatest virtue. As torchlight flickered against ancient stone walls and timber beams blackened by centuries of smoke, medieval bakers worked with a quiet precision learned not from books, but from generations of hands. Grain ground between heavy millstones powered by rivers that never slept. The flour coarse and full, rich with bran and germ. Nothing removed, nothing wasted, mixed with water drawn from deep wells and fermented slowly by unseen cultures carried on the air. This was bread that took time, bread that transformed through patience. Its nutrients unlocked by long fermentation, its minerals made ready for the body. As loaves slid into communal ovens heated by roaring wood fires, the smell rose thick and warm, filling streets and hearts alike. A smell of nourishment so complete it blurred the line between food and comfort in these villages and walled towns. Bread was eaten by peasants bent from the fields and knights hardened by steel, by children with bare feet on frozen floors and elders whose lives had been measured in harvests survived. It fed soldiers on long marshes and monks in silent cloisters. It held strength within its dense crumb, slow energy that burned steady through long hours of labor. As rain lashed thatched roofs and winter gnawed at stone keeps, this bread kept bodies standing and minds clear. Its natural fermentation, breaking down what the human body could not, supporting digestion without anyone knowing the word for it, sustaining gut and blood alike, not by design but by tradition, beyond the walls. Forests groaned in the wind and wolves watched from the dark, while inside, bread cooled on rough wooden tables, crusts cracking softly like embers. This was food shaped by necessity and respect for nature's limits. Every grain counted, every loaf shared. There were no empty calories here, no speed, no shortcuts. Only the deep intelligence of survival woven into daily life. And in this world of iron and faith, of mud and prayer, medieval bread stood quietly at the center, a superfood not named but lived, carrying strength forward one bite at a time as the medieval sun climbed higher and mist burned away from river valleys. The life hidden inside that dark bread began its quiet work within the body, though no scholar of the age could have named it. Men and women felt its difference in their bones and breath. This was bread that stayed with you, that released its strength slowly as fields demanded hours of bending backs and frozen fingers wrapped around wooden plows. The long fermentation had already done labor of its own, breaking down harsh compounds in the grain, softening what would otherwise burden the gut, allowing minerals like iron and zinc to pass into blood and muscle. This was nourishment shaped by time rather than speed. And time was something the medieval world understood well inside. Stone monasteries where candle smoke curled against painted saints. Monks recorded prayers while their bodies were sustained by the same loaves eaten beyond the walls. Bread paired with broth and roots, not indulgence but balance. Its dense texture slowing hunger, its natural acids preserving it through days when food could not be spared. This bread resisted mold, endured travel, and kept strength alive during famine years when grain was thin and hope thinner still. While outside the cloister, in market squares alive with shouts and iron scales clanging, vendors traded loaves by weight, their darkness a mark of honesty rather than poverty. White bread existed but was rare, costly, stripped of life by fine sieving, eaten by the wealthy and often blamed for weakness and illness. A quiet truth known through experience long before science as winds swept across battlements and banners snapped above castles. Soldiers carried hard loaves in their packs, bread that could survive rain and cold, its sour tang a shield against spoilage, sustaining long march and siege waits measured in months. Not hours, this bread fed endurance, not cravings. And in a world where medicine was prayer and survival depended on strength, it mattered deeply what kind of fuel entered the body. Bones grew stronger on minerals left intact. Teeth decayed less where sugars were scarce. Blood sugar rose slowly, preventing the sudden weakness that could mean death in a field or on a wall, yet far from the fields and ovens. Change was already whispering through the centuries. Millstones would one day be replaced by steel rollers. Fermentation rushed, fiber stripped away in the name of softness and status. But in the medieval age, bread remained close to the land and honest in its purpose, shaped by hands that understood hunger and seasons. This was food woven into the rhythm of survival, not decoration on a plate. And as smoke drifted from chimneys and bells echoed across stone and soil, medieval bread continued to do what it had always done, quietly strengthening bodies while history marched forward, unaware of what it would one day lose as centuries turned like slow grinding stones. The bond between bread and the human body began to change, not with a single decision, but through a gradual drift away from the rhythms that had once governed survival. In the medieval world, grain was alive with variety. Rye from cold northern soils, barley from wind-cut hills, spelt and emmer from ancient fields worked by ox in hand. Each grain carrying resilience bred through hardship, their fibers dense and complex, feeding the body steadily while also nourishing the unseen life within the gut. The wild fermentation of dough created living food, rich with beneficial cultures and natural acids that protected digestion and balanced the blood. This was nourishment shaped by ecology and patience rather than profit. In low timber houses where smoke clung to rafters and snow pressed against shuttered windows, families broke bread slowly, the crust firm, the crumb dark and heavy. It demanded chewing and time, sending signals of fullness long before hunger turned desperate. Energy released like a steady fire rather than a sudden flame. This was a quiet protection against exhaustion and sickness. Bodies were not perfect, lives were hard, yet metabolic collapse was rare. For food did not betray those who relied on it. Even the poorest loaves retained the grain's soul. Fiber, minerals, and oils left intact, sustaining muscle and mind alike. As trade expanded and cities grew, milling technology evolved. Stone gave way to faster methods, grain was stripped finer and whiter. A visual symbol of wealth and refinement, yet in castle halls and noble kitchens, the soft pale bread brought strange consequences. Quicker hunger, weaker digestion, ailments poorly understood. While peasants eating darker loaves endured with greater resilience, the contrast visible though unexplained. Tradition carried the truth forward when science did not. Fermentation time shortened, not by choice but by necessity, war, demand, and speed began to creep into the process. Yet the medieval world still stood closer to balance than the age that followed. Outside the cities, forests whispered and rivers carved valleys as they always had. But human diets slowly shifted away from their ancient partnership with grain. The microbial life once nurtured by sourdough and whole flour began to fade, though no one knew its name. What they felt instead was fatigue, illness, and hunger returning faster than before, a warning written into bodies rather than books. Medieval bread had once acted as both food and medicine, supporting digestion, immune strength, and endurance without ceremony. And as history pushed forward toward refinement and convenience, that quiet medicine was slowly forgotten, leaving behind a legacy baked into stone ovens and fading traditions. waiting to be remembered again as the medieval world edged closer to its final centuries. The quiet transformation of bread mirrored a deeper shift in human life itself. Towns grew denser, markets louder, and time more demanding. The old patience once given to grain began to fracture under pressure. Ovens burned hotter and faster, fermentation shortened not by wisdom but by urgency. And the living dialogue between dough and air grew faint. Yet within castles and villages the body still remembered what it had lost. Fatigue crept sooner into the limbs of laborers, hunger returned with sharper edges. And ailments once rare began to linger like dampened stone walls inside. Great halls where banners hung heavy and firelight danced across armor. Feasts overflowed with meats and fine white bread. Its softness praised as progress, its color mistaken for purity. Yet this bread passed quickly through the body, offering little resistance to hunger, spiking energy only to let it collapse, while beyond those walls, farmers and craftsmen clung to darker loaves, still rich with bran and soul, still fermented by wild cultures that fought decay and nourished strength. The divide between appearance and function widened, echoing a broader separation between humans and the land that sustained them, in narrow streets lined with timber houses. The sounds of grinding grain softened as centralized mills took control. Rivers still turned wheels, but the relationship grew distant. Flour traveled farther, aged less, and lost its living spark. The unseen companions of digestion slowly vanished, replaced by emptiness masked as refinement. Bodies adapted poorly, digestion strained, teeth weakened. And hunger sharpened, all without understanding why. Medicine blamed spirits and imbalance. Prayer filled the gaps where knowledge could not yet reach. While the true answer cooled silently on forgotten hearths, as winter winds howled through battlements and frost cracked stone. Bread no longer held the same quiet authority it once had. It fed mouths but not resilience. Calories without endurance, fullness without nourishment. The medieval body, shaped for hardship, began to face a new enemy not from sword or famine, but from food itself. Stripped of its ancient intelligence, yet even in this decline, echoes remained. In remote villages, monasteries, and mountain paths where sour loaves still rose slowly in wooden bowls, where hands trusted time more than speed, there survived a memory of balance, a knowledge carried not in words but in flavor and strength, waiting for a future age to rediscover what the medieval world once knew instinctively, that true nourishment was never about softness or speed, but about harmony between earth, fire, time, and the human body. As the echoes of the medieval world fade into history, the story of its bread lingers like warmth in cold stone halls, a reminder of how deeply food once understood the human body. In an age ruled by seasons rather than seconds, bread was not engineered for convenience, but shaped by survival. Its strength drawn from whole grain, wild air, and time itself. Today, as modern loaves line bright shelves soft and pale and silent, the body responds differently. Hunger returns faster. Energy rises and falls like a broken tide. Digestion struggles. And what once sustained generations now weakens those who depend on it. Not because humans have changed, but because bread has in the medieval world. People walked farther, worked longer, and endured harsher lives. Yet their daily food carried intelligence built by tradition. Fermentation unlocked nutrients modern science would name centuries later. Fiber fed unseen allies within the gut. Minerals strengthened bone and blood. And slow energy release protected the body from collapse. This was not theory, but lived reality, written into endurance and survival. Modern bread, stripped of bran and life, offers speed without substance, flooding the body with sugar, then leaving it empty. A betrayal masked by softness and sweetness, as torchlight once guided hands kneading dough in silence. Today machines rush the process, yeast forced to act in hours instead of days. Flour refined until only starch remains. The ancient partnership between human and grain broken, the consequences ripple outward. Rising inflammation, metabolic strain, weakened digestion. Problems blamed on age or fate rather than food. Yet the answer waits quietly in the past, in stone ovens buried beneath centuries, in sour scents remembered by instinct rather than memory when we look back across medieval landscapes of misty fields and wind-cut hills. We are not romanticizing hardship, we are remembering wisdom. Bread was never meant to be empty, it was meant to be alive, nourishing both body and the invisible systems that protect it. The medieval world did not call bread a superfood. It simply trusted what worked, what endured famine and cold and war, what carried strength through centuries, and as modern life searches endlessly for supplements and solutions. The truth stands older than castles and deeper than written history. Health was once baked slowly, with patience and respect for nature's limits. The crackle of a medieval crust cooling on wood carried more nourishment than any label could promise. And in remembering that bread, we remember something essential about ourselves. That survival and strength are not found in speed or refinement, but in honoring time, tradition, and the quiet intelligence of the past.